Welcome to MSP Unplugged, episode number 52, Modern IT Solution. I'm your host, Jeff Hallish. This is our live show where we discuss different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Let me introduce the co-hosts. We have Paco LeBron from Prodigy Techs. Paco, how you doing?
I am better than good, better than most.
Awesome. Good to have you. And also we have Ryan Denehy from who is the CEO and founder of Electric. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you and excited to hear this story. Well, before we do that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about TechCon Unplugged 2021. And Paco, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, this is my favorite subject, Jeff. So as we have been talking about for the last several months, and even before we came into the new year, TechCon Unplugged 2021, we are returning to a live event, fingers crossed, in September 17th to the 19th over in Rosemont, Illinois, essentially Chicagoland area. So yes, we are bringing it to Chicago. And the purpose obviously with the event is to make it as convenient as possible for those to get to, enjoy themselves, and everything in between. So we will have this on a weekend, obviously. Friday, we'll have a Friday night social right in the hotel. And then we're going to have a lot of great content on Saturday and Sunday. We have a couple of great vendors that have signed on thus far, waiting for the ink to dry before we can announce them. And I know I keep saying this every week, but I'm hoping that the ink will dry eventually soon so we can disclose who will be joining the show. There are some that are returning from our 2019 show, and there are going to be some new ones that a lot of you will be very excited to hear that will be in attendance. So what is your ticket price get you of $199? We will make sure to feed you all of those days, and that's going to include the Friday and Saturday night social, which on Saturday night we will be at Dave & Buster's like we were in 2019 in Grand Rapids. And then we'll also make sure we take care of you for breakfast and lunch. So essentially, one-stop shop to pay. You won't have to worry about going out of your pocket to get something to eat. And there'll be a lot of great entertainment and a lot of great knowledge, peer-to-peer, pressing elbow, touching elbows because we can't press the flesh right now because, kind of the situation, and a lot more. So we're going to have a lot of great opportunities here to just really talk to each other. I know a lot of people have been really dying to or really trying to get to a live event, but obviously safety first. So for those that are kind of contemplating on purchasing their ticket, we do have some restrictions where we have to limit the amount of tickets that we're selling. I know every promoter says buy now or you won't miss your chance. We're literally telling you, if you trust us, we're telling you, it may literally run out. So we will make sure to have a waiting list if you are interested after that. But if you are interested, purchase your ticket now. And again, if restrictions do end up lightening, then obviously the list will grow and then we can invite more people. So if you are interested in joining us, techconunplugged.com, you can head over there, purchase your ticket, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Very good. Thank you very much, Paco. All right, let's go to Ryan. Ryan, we're going to talk a little bit about your origin story or where you came from and how you got to be here.
Great. I mean, where do we begin? How far back should I go?
Well, we could go to the crib if you wanted to, but you can start wherever you want, whatever's most important to you.
Yeah, so I think probably the most relevant thing for today is really talking about, I think, how I got the idea for Electric in the first place. I was working on my second venture-backed tech startup around 2012 in San Francisco, and we were probably like 25 or 30 employees, but we were starting to do a lot more hiring. And I think I spent the better part of a whole weekend setting up computers for all the new hires. And then a week or two later, we had a serious Wi-Fi issue, and we ended up having to send our sales team home 2 afternoons in a row. And then I spent the next 3 days trying to find the local, Meraki support guy who could come, and that was like a whole mess. And so just remember thinking about it. I'm like, how is it that every other part of my company, I've got some piece of software, I've got some tool that I'm using, and whether it's like finance or HR or whatever, I've got all these great tools, but somehow for IT, like I'm calling Meraki and I'm getting introduced to these like random VARs and MSPs, and it took 4 days for us to get our Wi-Fi going again. And I just kept thinking about this problem for small and mid-sized businesses, and there's got to be a better way, basically, through sort of my own experience. And then, interestingly, the company I was running at the time was we were building retail analytics software, and we had a device that had to be installed in the store. And so we ended up actually selling that product through the channel, mostly through small VARs and MSPs that were in the Apple ACN. Because a lot of those MSPs were also the point of sale resellers for these small businesses. So they'd set up the tablet-based point of sale and the wireless network in the store, and then they would also deploy our analytics tracking solution. And so that was kind of where I got reintroduced to the MSP space, was just building this channel of 150 local providers that were selling and supporting our product. I ended up hiring some people with MSP experience. One of them, this guy Leaf, we've since become good friends, and he really introduced me to a lot of folks in his network. And as weird as it sounds, I just became enamored with the MSP space. I was like, here's a business that makes a ton of sense to me. Every company needs an IT partner. Every small mid-sized business needs an IT partner. But at the same time, what I thought was so interesting, and again, this was 5 or 6 years ago, was that there was these two giant shifts happening, right? Where basically the first was that businesses were buying and using more tech than they had ever bought or used before. And it's all in the cloud, right? So if you think about it, like 10, 15 years ago, you maybe had a half dozen or a dozen apps. Many of them either ran on a server or were installed directly on your machine. Today, the average small business is using, 50 or more applications. They're all in the cloud. And so you have this IT burden that was and continues to increase almost geometrically every year. But the other thing I was seeing was this new generation of business owners. They want to solve problems with software, not just with services, right? The average kind of digital native buyer at any small business, their preference is to go online, sign up for something, log into a dashboard. People are still important, but sort of this digital native buyer, when they look around the rest of their business, kind of the same experience I had, whether it's payroll, expense management, insurance, and now IT, it's all going online, right? And so, it's just something I'd thought about for years, even while I was running my previous company. These two trends, if you put the two things together, right? Tons of apps all in the cloud. The only way you can manage that scalably and still make money is if you start to automate, the management of those things. And then two, you have this buyer who wants a more software-led versus services-led solution. So back in 2016, I said, all right, like let's reinvent the MSP model as a software-centric model with some services rather than services with some software.
That is definitely a different take on the industry, I think, as far as recognizing that times are changing and that we need to change along with those times. So that's really good. So now you created Electric. Now, first question I have to ask, where'd you come up with the name, or why did you come up with the name in particular?
So you know what I found? What I found, like in my previous two companies, is like naming a company is really hard and really annoying, and in the end, it kind of doesn't matter. Right? Like as long as the service is good, like you can kind of get away. Like the name will just become, you can just ascribe meaning to it, later on. However, this is when I was living in San Francisco. I live in New York now. Living in San Francisco, I was so sick of all these tech companies with made up names, or it's like some word with no vowels, or it like ends in like .io or like whatever, and I'm just like, you know what? Like if we're going to do this, I want to have a brand that is actually like a brand that's easy to remember. It's not some fake made up word, and so I just had a running list. Even before I knew what Electric was going to be as a business, I had just, from my previous company, had like a Google Doc that was like words that I thought would be cool for a company name, and in the end, I actually thought, Electric, there was something slightly irreverent about it. It's like, well, it's IT, obviously, like everything is powered by electricity. Like it's just, it wasn't something that we put a lot of thought into, but ultimately I'm like, well, if we're going to really do this differently, like it's not going to be, Ryan's IT Solutions or, or some really like generic name, So anyway, so that's what we did. And we've, since we've had a lot of fun with the brand over the years. So.
Oh, that's cool. No, that's great. It is hard to come up with names, and a lot of people leave E's and stuff like that out because E's are evil, and in their name just to get just to get a name with a .com. And I know .coms have in the past been very important to people. And I agree with you 100%. Is that it really at the end of the day it doesn't matter. Whoever is the face of the company, and that's what the customer is basically buying into. The face of that company, the people they interact with, and that's what's most important. The name is really kind of a secondary thing.
Well, and particularly too, funny you mentioned the .com thing. That's also another thing where 10 years ago that was super important. Like, oh no, I can't register the .com. I need to name it something else. And then it just these days it doesn't really matter because very few people are actually typing a URL directly into the browser. It's either linked or they're Googling it. And it's funny. There's a company. There's two people that I know who both have a single word name for their company, and they went out and bought the domains. And it's crazy what they still cost. There's a company in our building called Donut, and they bought donut.com, and I think it was like $200,000.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, good for them. For me, I was like, of all the places to spend money, I think when we tried to buy electric.com, it was like $500,000 or $600,000. And I'm like, I'd rather just hire more people than
right.
do that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, that's probably the smarter move for sure. That's pretty funny. Wow. All right. So obviously you started this company up and you started to move forward with your ideas of what you could do as far as using software, I would imagine, to automate things versus having to have a technician touch everything that they have to do, like we used to have to do in the old days. Mm-hmm. Every little thing that we had to update or renew or just make it better or configure it or whatever. All those things took time and effort. And most people in these businesses didn't have a lot of time to be able to do a lot of that stuff. So what direction were you guys moving, and why did you make some of the decisions you made when it went more towards the software automation versus, having people involved?
Well, we sort of went at it in a kind of a backwards way relative to how you might traditionally think about building a software company. Like I went to the early investors that I brought on, and I said, look, this is going to sound crazy, but the end state of the business is largely going to be software with sort of a thin layer of humans in the middle and doing account management and things like that. In order to get there, we do basically just have to build an MSP with a software front end. And as time goes on and we collect all this data, we can figure out where are the best pockets of automation that we want to be pursuing at any given time based on what's going to lead to the best customer experience, and the best for us in terms of, creating more margin. Right. And so, and so again, it was kind of a backwards approach because we basically had to say, look, you're signing up to be part of a tech company, but it's not going to be a tech company at the beginning. It's a services business. And you just have to trust me that, we're going to spend the money wisely to automate stuff away. And over time, we will sort of justify the multiple that you pay to get involved, and that felt like the right way to do it because ultimately, in the eyes of the customer, they don't really care what's automated or what's not. The customer just wants to know that, if I've got a new hire starting on Monday, that computer is going to show up and be properly configured, or that if we do a lot over Slack and Microsoft Teams, that if I send somebody a message on the support desk because I'm locked out of an application, that I get back in a few minutes, right? And so that's really what we've tried to stay focused on. It's providing what we think is a modern IT support experience, regardless of we're really not trying to get too hung up on promoting to the customer what's automated or what's not. Because at the end of the day, it's just about, hey, I've got this cool dashboard I can log into and I got all my stuff there and I can reach out to them over chat. Great. The rest is kind of on us to figure out.
Well, I think when we make ourselves expedient in a learning how to do something automated, that just saves our margin, that saves our time, that saves our money. And then at the end of the day, you can make more money doing that. Plus you can have more customers, the more things are automated. So it kind of makes sense to look at it in that way.
Well, and also too, what we realized, and I realized this at my previous company, becoming a customer of an MSP, was that I really wanted to have a lot more visibility into what was happening. I didn't always want to have to make a phone call or schedule a big meeting and have the MSP come in and present sort of like the data or their findings or whatever. I really liked the idea of using software to automate a lot of the kind of manual effort that would go into an MSP, basically telling you how your business is doing from an IT standpoint. And there's some interesting tools on the market that MSPs use now, like, something like a Bright Gauge, right? But I wanted to kind of take it to another level and say, here's something that anybody, even a non-technical person in the company, can look at and say, hey, you know what? Like, everything looks good. Like, from a security standpoint, we're all good. From a, ticketing standpoint, everyone's taken care of. That kind of thing I felt was really missing. And so that's where automation becomes really useful, because otherwise, I would have to have an army of people running around constantly assembling reports and presentations to send to the customer. Now this is something that just kind of updates in real time.
Very cool. Hey, Paco, I was going to say, what are some of the things that, when you think about doing support, that has changed for you, going from more of a service type industry to a using a lot more software, using the cloud to automate a lot of things that you do in your business?
Well, I mean, I think that, before you can get to automation, you have to standardize, right?
Yeah.
And I think standardization is the big piece that we all try to drive for, whether you're automating or manually doing something.
Keyword try.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing as like trying to document, right? So documentation even more is even worse, right? But right. I think once the standardization happens is when you can understand the piece of, all right, we have X that is now standardized. It does the same thing over and over again. Now, how do we automate that from a human pushing a button to a webhook or an API calling it, or whatever the case may be, right? So, perfect example, for a lot of Microsoft 365 houses or MSPs that are using that product, it used to be where you would have to order a laptop through your disti or distributor, have it delivered, schedule a remote session or an on-site, transfer all their data, do all this whatever stuff, right? And then now with Microsoft Intune, Endpoint Manager, and Autopilot, someone can just log in with their Azure Active Directory email and password, and if you standardized it, all the automation from Autopilot just dumps all the stuff on there, right? So that's one piece of where automation would be key. But then you go into where Ryan's talking about is the step further. Yes, there are dashboards and there are connections to other SaaS software that are out there, but what's giving you the complete picture, right? What's able to get you the most bang for your buck? What's able to grab on these standardized options and getting the most automation in place? Because then now you either can make two decisions, either A, dedicating manual resources to somewhere else, or you put yourself in a better position where you can now actually understand your growth moving forward in a year to whatever your plan fiscally as well.
Paco, that's a great point. I think the standardization thing is, we've sort of lived through the pain of that firsthand of, sort of in the early days, and I'm sure every MSP goes through this. In the early days, you don't necessarily even know what you want to be standardizing or exactly what you should be doing for your customers. And then, one day you just wake up and all of a sudden you're like, wait, this is a very real business. I've got like a lot of people I'm supporting. There's sort of like the pain of going back and trying to retroactively get everybody on a standard stack and, whatever else. But I'd be curious, from in your experience, what were the things that you feel like what are the things you feel like you've standardized really well versus what are the things that are still really challenging?
Sure. I think it's a moving target, right? I think right now, and when I say that, I mean it specifically where, I used to be a one-man shop with subcontractors. Now, 6 months to almost a year later, I now have 4 employees, right? And then me is 5. So, now I have to, the stuff that I've standardized for myself, I'm now having to, like you just said, now I'm retroactively breaking all that apart to then standardize to a team, because transparency has been the number one key for all of us, right? So where I think what we standardize best on is knowing what our client systems are. So, when it comes down to the weeds of standard designators for our particular clients, all those retroactively mapping them through all of our systems, what vendors we're using and things of that nature. And then all of those tying into our RMM and PSA, which happen to be the same companies. and getting that most information out of the reporting and things of that nature, right? Because if you don't standardize in the individual sites that you're pulling into something, then you're just, garbage in, garbage out. Like when I was a database engineer for 10 years prior to in a previous life, that was a big thing to have to deal with. What I think we're struggling at right now is understanding, and I think a lot of MSPs deal with this, is two things. One, trying to document their process and getting stuck in the weeds of, there's these edge cases that you have to account for. But in reality, as long as you document 80% of the situation, the edge cases can just be added. And then the second piece of all that is going 3 months down the line of having your particular stack, and then they see another thing that looks shiny or can replace things and stuff like that, then they're on a whole nother mode of switching to another tool because it may be more efficient for them. But now they've derailed documentation, implementation, labor, effort, things of that nature that have expanded it even worse. So like for us, we finally got to the point where we've stuck with our stack this past August, and it's like, all right, for 12 months, this is what we're doing, unless someone really, I can't use the phrase that John Davinsky uses, but basically when stuff hits the fan, that's when you start to look for something else. So I would say the struggling on that piece is getting to that route. And then now that you've got to that route of what your particular stacks and understanding what their roles are for the particular framework you decide to use, now how do you automate and document that so it's standardized?
Yeah, well, I think the challenge that we ran into with this too is we sell to all different types of companies now. A lot of where we got our start was with these higher growth tech startups, and what we ultimately found was that those aren't always the best customers, and it's not exclusive just to other tech startups, but it can be really any company that we would find would have what we consider to be like high IT maturity, or otherwise like a very nuanced point of view on what they wanted to be doing. And I think like what has worked well for us is we've been really clear with people in the last couple of years, like if you want a totally bespoke solution and you just want to use us to kind of be in the engine room deploying stuff that you dream up, that we're not those people. However, if you want to focus on running your business and you just want to leave us to do the IT stuff and you sort of trust our judgment with what we deploy, we are amazing at that. And like neither approach is necessarily wrong. Like I've met a bunch of MSPs here in New York City that just specialize in working with hedge funds, and like that's a phenomenal business if that's what you're set up to do, because it's low staff counts, but really big dollars, really big margins. But they're expecting a very bespoke, very white glove service. And again, that's fine if that's the only thing that you do. Whereas like we sort of looked at the other side of the coin. It's like it's all about standardization. It's all about people that frankly don't care too much about how it gets done as long as it gets done. So, but it's tough in the early days figuring out like which of those you want to be.
Well, I mean, I think also for that, there's a phrase that I mentioned. John Dubinsky is a friend of the show here, where making your job easier makes it easier for the client, right?
Oh, so yeah.
If you get that client where they're not stuck in the weeds, they're not trying to figure out how the sausage is made, then things move a little bit smoother, because then you can explain to them, hey, here's what you really should care about and here's where it's at. But then if you do have a high moving client, like you mentioned, where they have to be the admins in the systems, they have to be aware of every step of the way, it makes standardization a little bit harder, because you can have the documentation, but it's in your lingo or it's in your way of understanding, so you can best troubleshoot it, not for an end user to troubleshoot it as well, right? So I think there's two of those sides, but being able to get that right client and being able to understand on, hey, if I'm standardizing because it makes my job easier, which will then eventually make things easier for you, and when they get it, it's just that much more powerful.
Hard to say no sometimes, though, when sales is hard, and when you have somebody who comes in and it's like, hey, our budget's $30,000 a month, but then you sort of like look at the requirements and it's like, yeah, about that.
Yeah, that's tough. Talking about things like, I know one of the statements I got in one of the, I think I read it in an email I got from you guys was, IT is not the sexiest industry. And I think part of that too, and this kind of goes into our story a little bit, is that if you are in the middle of winter and your furnace goes out and you've got to call a heating and cooling person to come out and fix that, that's uber important to you, right? Because it's freezing in your house. You want to get it back up and running as quickly as possible. For some reason, the IT industry has always been this like, yeah, we know we got to have it, but we really don't want to spend the money to do it. So we're just going to kind of trickle things and kind of make it work. Well, now with things like HIPAA laws and all these different things, security breaches, things that are happening, ransomware, I think IT is really becoming a more intricate industry in what they do. And I think people need to start realizing that it is as important, if not more important, than your heating and cooling person or your, carpenter or whatever. Any of those types of industries where it seems like, yeah, I can see something. And the problem with IT is you don't really, the customer's not seeing anything. And that's the beauty of it. They really shouldn't see anything. Their stuff should just work when they come in the office every day. Until it doesn't, then you go in and you fix it and boom, they're on their way again. But most of the time, things run pretty smoothly. And so it's hard for IT companies to justify what they do. Because at the end of the day, Paco, you're talking about, if the company wants to know how the sausage was made, well, at the end of the day, you could explain to them how the sausage was made, and they would still absolutely have zero idea of what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, so like perfect example, right? So I have a client where we did a migration recently from G Suite to Microsoft, and emails were going into spam, and it turned out that the web developer misplaced the SPF record, and then they were emailing out of a system that they didn't tell us about, so we put their include in the SPF record. Anyway, long story short, so 2 weeks went by. Email should be fixed. I mean, I haven't heard any issues. I haven't heard any problems, things of that nature. But, so it keeps coming up because, it's a big worry because, they are taking in donations and care, from a lot of these big partners. So the question becomes, are they receiving the invoices? Are they receiving the emails from our CRM system? So, again, they were like, well, how do we know? Right. And we need to know. And I was like, all right. So I pulled up the Martian and I was like, look, we're all green here. Your SPF records included. You could see, the CRM is included inside here. We're signing them via DKIM and your DMARC is set to none just in case. So, we should be good. Has anyone told you haven't received them? So the question became into, okay, we'll follow up. But then it was, I showed them all green and then the question stopped. And then when I went into the details of explaining what it was, you just saw the glaze over of the eyes, and it just was basically me summarizing. And as I saw that, I kind of just tailored it off and then just said, hey, so what are we going to do here? Right. And that's kind of where you say they want to know. But then when they realize it, that they're in the middle of them not wanting to know after saying they wanted to know, then things become a little bit more smoother at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, if you've ever worked at like a big company and, you have to like compile some big report for like most of the time, no one actually cares about the report. They just care that you did it and that you know what you're doing. And it's like, okay, this all looks fine, like whatever. Right. And, it's like, I think that's ultimately what, like, Paco, like I'm agreeing with you. It's like ultimately they just want to know that you're on it. But yeah, the second you start to go into the weeds of like, and then we did this, like whatever.
Yep. And so it's funny you say that on like when you pull all this data because they wanted it and no one ever goes through it. We had a web developer that I partnered with and they redid this website for one of the nonprofits I sit on. And so they have a section that says, do you want, and then it's like, because they're a delegate agency and stuff like that. So it's like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? Do you want licensing? Do you want to, help for the city services? So there's a line item there that says, do you want to party all the time? And it leads to the Eddie Murphy YouTube video of the song.
That's a great video too.
So what's great about that is that you can tell that no one has pointed it out and no one has discovered it. So it's like, it's on this long list and they required that, like, no, we need to have everything here. And it just proves that, yeah, they wanted it, but are they going to really go through it? No. Like they're gonna see it.
Well, that's
looks
incredible.
good.
Otherwise, you get people hitting you up being like, "Dude, that video is amazing."
Yep.
That's funny.
So,
but Jeff, the point you made though about companies paying for IT and seeing the value, I agree wholeheartedly. Right now we're sort of living in a time where, kind of to my earlier point around, businesses buying and using more and more technology and being more and more dependent on it. But the software line item, the tech line item just keeps getting bigger, right? And so you think about it, even a small company, right? Like if we signed up a small, PR agency here in the city the other day, I think they were like, I don't know, 30 employees. And any one of our sales reps said to them, like, so you've got like $75,000 in laptops. You're spending $200,000 a year on software. Why wouldn't you spend, $40,000 a year with us to make sure that all that stuff is running smoothly, right? And I think people are finally starting to kind of get hip to that it's not like, because they use technology so much in their home, I think there's a new respect for the technology in the workplace. And that just wasn't the deal 10 years ago. And I think now more than ever, particularly with remote work being here to stay in some capacity, hybrid work, right? Whenever things come back, one of the things we saw, and I think every MSP saw this, is that people stopped paying their landlord, but they didn't stop paying their MSP. And so, I think there's just, I don't think there's ever been a better time to be in this industry than right now.
I mean, it goes back to what Jeff said, where, you don't question a plumber, you don't question an electrician when they come out and say these. And I think now, especially after this past year, there's a lot of realization that now we are infrastructure, right? And we are one of those sectors that not only where they were saying essential, and depending on how it was defined in each individual state in the US, but really it's this past year alone has showed how important, like you just said, getting all that stuff working smoothly / implementing things in a flying rate, because it was a need at that point. And that need trumped other things, like you just said, like rent, because, hey, I need to be able to write out quotes and attend meetings and things of that nature to thrive my business. And I'm not in the facility that, we're all sheltering home, so they can wait for the rent. I'll deal with the ramifications there. And now that priority has shifted, because again, we're not being, one, considered more as infrastructure, and two, the importance now that what we need to do to get everything working smoothly or migrated to work smoothly as well.
Ryan, with your company, as you guys are moving forward, and obviously you have employees that have to do certain things in the company. It's not, you don't have a bunch of robots working for you, I don't think. So what is because my understanding is your culture is a little bit different than maybe what some of the mainstream culture is out there. What's the culture in your business as far as taking care of employees and working with individuals as they're rolling out your services?
Yeah, I mean, company culture, I think that it sounds corny, but like to me, that's sort of the crown jewel of our company. At the end of the day, like the quality of the software we build, the quality of the customer experience, the sales numbers that the team puts up, it's just a byproduct of the people that we hire and how we train them. And if you think about it, like any company is actually, it's not a real thing, right? Like I had this sort of, like once we started working from home, and I mean, I'm in our office now, but 99% of our employees are not. Like I had this like weird existential kind of like sort of existential crisis right at the beginning of when lockdown started last year, where I was like, well, wait, like the company, like we don't have like a warehouse full of things. Like we're not selling like a physical good. Like electric is just a fictional concept that I made up and somehow have convinced everybody to show up and like all agree to like do something together. Right. And that's like, and so when you think about it through that lens, like why people show up and who you have showing up and what matters to them and how you take care of them, like that's the business. If you don't figure that stuff out first, you're not really ever going to be able to scale. And like we're almost 300 employees, or we are about 300 full-time employees now. When I started the company 5 years ago or 4.5 years ago, there were 4 of us sitting in a half-empty office in Lower Manhattan. And so as we've scaled, and this was partly because I think I made a fair amount of mistakes trying to scale my previous companies. The biggest thing that we really focused on was it's just all about not just the intellect and the experience of who you're hiring, but it's all the soft skills, right? And so ultimately, like like the company culture and like what we do for our employees, it ends up just being a byproduct of the people that we hire and everybody kind of having these shared values. Like I don't really care where anybody went to school. Like we're probably the most successful tech company in New York with the least amount of Ivy League educated people. I mean, I went to Hofstra out on Long Island. Like it's not a particularly great, university. We have plenty of people who work here that didn't go to college at all. Like I just don't care, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're smart and you're hardworking and you're a kind person and you care about other people and you're just sort of like in it to win it, like that really carries the day for us. And so now at 300 people, most of the people here all fit that description. But the nice thing is that description does not care about where you grew up or how much money your parents had or who, what you believe in, kind of outside of those things. And so I think what it's resulted in is just a workplace environment that's supportive and collaborative and a lot of fun. And there's a huge diversity of people and opinions and backgrounds. So once you have all that, like for us, I think at this point, it's created a really solid foundation. It's created a place that people like showing up to. And then once all that trust is there, what we've been able to do is also be a lot more creative with what we do, for the team. So for example, the first Friday of every month is a day off for the whole company. Now, obviously we have a support desk. So there are some people who, will work the Friday shift, but they'll get to take their day off, another day. But for the most part, it's a day off for the whole company. Things like that where we just realized, like, particularly with work from home, like no one's going on vacation, no one's taking time off. But because we all trust each other, we know that like, hey, if we just run with like a smaller team on that first Friday, like customers are still going to be happy. They're still going to get served. We're all going to, so I think all those things rolled together in the end. I think our customers even see it too, the way we interact with them and the fact that like we actually care, they're not just calling and reading off of a script, but like, like last Friday, for example, we one of our agents was going back and forth with a prospect. It was like late on a Friday, and he jokingly was like, "Sweet, well, can you order me a pizza while you're at it?" And we did. We sent 2 pizzas to his house.
Oh, that's awesome!
I can't believe it. He sent us a picture of him and his wife holding up the 2 pizza boxes, right? And like that, as silly as it sounds, like if you can create a company where like that kind of thing is allowed to happen, it usually bodes well for lots of other things that are happening that are materially more important to the customer than getting a pizza.
Well, I would think too that with that type of culture, you're probably stopping a lot of the burnout that a lot of people have in this type of business, because when you're talking to a customer, especially people that are doing, whether it's sales or support, both those things take a lot out of people. And if, you got to have the right personality and all that kind of stuff. That's the other thing too that's hard. Sometimes you have people that are really good at like the background keyboard stroking stuff, but not so good at the, face-to-face, connecting with another individual and explaining, hey, here's what you need, blah, 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 and go on from there. So that sounds really good.
It's tough though. Like we're really proactive about all this stuff, and it's still like, I have our head of HR. She pulls a list every once a month and basically shows who's actually taking PTO and who isn't. And, we tell people like, listen, you got to take time off, and because if you don't, and so there's a part of it where you're just always fighting this inertia of people just wanting to work harder and wanting to work harder. And that's amazing when you get to that point. I've also been in situations at previous companies where I couldn't get people to work, and that's a complete nightmare, right? We have the opposite, but it's a huge responsibility. So
no, that's good. And for those that don't know, because I even though our show's named MSP Unplugged, I hate acronyms. PTO means paid time off. So just for those that might not know what that means out there. But so, yeah, it's one of those things that's great, because to create a culture like that and keep people wanting more, you want them to work harder. But I also like the fact that you guys are letting people know, hey, you need to take time off. You need to take time away, because everybody needs to recharge, no matter whether you're an introvert, extrovert, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, everybody's got to recharge and come back in ready to fight again. because working in, it seems like a lot of companies in this industry, they want to work 24/7 and they're working, many, many hours a week. And then the results at the end of that week are not exactly what you would call stellar income. So a lot of people burn themselves out real quickly and they go, you know what, this industry is just not for me. And I think with your guys' take on it and how the company is moving forward, I think this is very important because this is what we talk about all the time. Everybody needs to take margin in their lives. Everybody needs to make sure that I know that the big term work-life balance is not a real thing. Listen, there's seasons, people. There's seasons where your nose is going to be the grindstone and you're going to be getting it. But then there's also seasons where you need to remember you can't do that in your entire life. And I caution a lot of people out there because what you can do in your 20s, 30s, and maybe even 40s changes a lot once you get to that, those midlife years. So you got to protect yourself up front to make sure that you can make it for the long haul, because at the end of the day, you don't want burnout. You don't want to be, have nothing to look forward to. And that's just not a good place to be for anybody mentally. So I like the culture that you guys have created over there.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I'm sure all three of us at some point in our careers have gotten to that point where you just work yourself to the bone and don't want to do it anymore.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time to come back from that. I had that my previous company, I think after we sold it, it took me 6 months before I could step away from my computer and not immediately start getting like agita about like some fire that was probably erupting, because I was working and I wasn't working smart. Like you talk to anybody and you go, oh, it's about working smart and not working hard. Everyone nods their head and goes, oh yeah, totally. I'm all about that. Very few people actually work smart though.
Yes.
No one will disagree, but very few people actually do it. And so I think it's partly the responsibility is on, us as a company to try to lead the way, because we were all once 22-year-olds, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, wanting to do our best, but you don't know what you don't know. So we try to lead the way there. And the other thing too is we try to invest in the team as much as possible too. I've told the company a bunch of times, like, I want everyone working here as long as possible because I like everybody and I just want to see everyone be successful and achieve their ambitions here as long as it makes sense. But on the flip side, selfishly, it's actually way cheaper for me to invest in my existing employees than to go find new ones.
And to find a good fit, right? Like if you already like the people and they're already fitting really well, it's that one meme that or picture that you see that it's like, the CFO talking to the CEO, and it's like, oh, why should we invest in our employees? What if they leave? And then it's like, well, what if they stay? And it's like, if we don't equip them, they're just not going to go anywhere. But if we do, it'll be that much more better, right? And I 100% believe that as well, because I feel like I got a good group of guys and gals that work with me, and I'm investing in them. Like for example, like my techs, he's sharp customer service, starting to learn the tech field. He's got a little bit of information, but how do I get him better? So like I'm paying for a certification on M365 and Teams and things like that, of core things that we're already working on that I know will benefit us if he stays. And then it just helps him build out his credibility too. If he did decide to want, he's invested as much as I am in him getting those skill sets. And then like my office manager on other things and stuff like that. So I agree 100%.
Oh yeah. But I think the problem that I had in the early days of electric, we didn't invest anywhere nearly enough in training and that kind of stuff. The fact that you're doing it now as a team of 5 is huge. And it's just going to pay dividends. We waited way too long, candidly, and I think part of it was my own fault because I'm self-taught in everything that I've done. So up until a couple of years ago, I always thought training, I'm like, training, it's called the internet, But then I realized I'm like, that's just not like, it's atypical. Like most people, you really, if they have a job, for example, like one of the first formalized pieces of training that we did is, we're a big Mac shop. And so Jamf is a tool that we use quite a bit. once we started sending people through Jamf training, all of a sudden, like, we started having a lot less issues with Jamf, and we started having people, taking their Jamf 100, 200 certificates and putting them up on the wall next to their desks, and it was a point of pride. And so we've just gone full bore in that direction.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think when you have the employees out there so a lot of times people will look at employees in one of two ways. They want an employee that knows a bunch of knowledge. And I don't look at it that way, because I would rather have somebody that's motivated, but at the end of the day, maybe doesn't know as much, and I can train them in the way that I want them to do business. So when it comes to your employee makeup, what percentages or how do you guys work that out as far as getting the right fit for your company?
Yeah, so the right fit, I mean, obviously competence is non-negotiable. There are certain roles where, for example, if we're hiring a sales rep, or an account executive, there's a certain amount of prior sales experience that just kind of has to exist, right? Or, if we're hiring someone as like an L2 or an L3, to work on our support desk, there's certain requirements, that we're going to want there. So depending on the role, the competence is a non-negotiable. But then the other side of it, though, is we're looking for people who demonstrate intellectual curiosity, right? Like the most interesting thing you're going to learn about people is at the very bottom of the resume. It's like, is it a musical instrument that they play? Did they ride their bike across America, or whatever, right? Like, those are actually the things that are going to tell you a lot about somebody. And so the thing that I've become a huge believer in is that ultimately, whether you're the CEO and running your own company, or you're an employee at another company, or whatever it is, your success is almost entirely determined not by what you know today, but how quickly you learn. That's basically it. The faster you are at learning, it's like when you see like the CEO of Burger King is 38, where he was when he got hired, right? And it's like, he wasn't born with any different gifts than anybody else. He just learned faster than everyone else, right? And so like the way that I kind of manage my own career, the way I encourage my management team to manage their careers, the way that we now are trying to instill in the culture here is like, it's just all about the speed of knowledge acquisition. And the better, if I can help everybody become like an expert learner, and we can bring people in who enjoy learning, the rising tide lifts all ships. The whole company is going to move forward way faster.
That's cool. So now when it comes to we've talked about the culture, the company, and kind of what you guys do a little bit differently. At the end of the day, obviously you guys have services and different things that you provide. So can you kind of go through what types of different support packages or things that you guys do with your company to partner with other companies to help them out either with their IT? Because I know there's a lot of different things on your website, and it's actually pretty cool because you guys lay a lot of pretty cool things out.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, you can think of us as as an MSP, just with a lot more software and sort of less humans. But the way that the type of customer we tend to work with is usually around a dozen or 15 employees on the low end, up to a few hundred employees. So typically for us, it's you're large enough where you're buying computers, you're paying for software, you're paying for license. You actually starting to have an IT budget, so the need is there. But you're small enough where at the most maybe you have one or two IT people, and we can be really helpful from a co-managed standpoint. Our average customer size is usually, call it 75 employees. So, getting up there, but still doesn't have an IT department, generally pretty low in terms of IT maturity. So they're really looking for a partner who can just come in and lay it all out for them. Basically the bases that we cover, again, not dissimilar to sort of any modern MSP, but we think about it as SaaS management, device management, network, and server. And we just want to bring all those things together in the most standardized way possible, and in a way that's really easy for even a non-technical person to figure out what we're doing and why it's important. We got our start focused specifically, primarily on Mac focused companies. That was really for the first year. And then, now we do, it's Mac, it's Windows. It's a pretty even split between the two. We've got a Slack integration. We've got a Microsoft Teams integration. So our preference generally is, to go through chat first, for ticketing. Obviously, we can hop on the phone if it's kind of a stickier issue, but every time we look at the ticket data, it's 80-90% of the stuff that people need help with. It's, hey, I need, can you add this person to this software? Can you, give me the, access to this license or whatever. So chat's really good for that. People don't really want to get on the phone for those kinds of things. And like I said, we have a dashboard. So, you can see your sort of device health in one place. You can see, all the SaaS applications that your company is using in one place. And so, if you're a CFO or you're head of operations, and you just are kind of wondering what's going on, we kind of give you the peace of mind with all that. And so, and then we have a network of a few dozen local MSPs who can augment work that we don't do, right? So the key for us has been to stay really focused on just kind of those core buckets that I just mentioned. But, for example, if you're a customer of ours in Atlanta and you call up your account manager and you say, hey, we're getting ready to reopen the office and I got a big job and I need a whole, I want the works, new network, firewall, Zoom rooms, the whole bit. We've got a projects team that can really help scope that. And then we've got people on the ground, usually local providers. And it can be something as simple as, we've got a great cabling technician and you just need to pull a bunch of lines on up to, these big $50,000, $100,000 kind of one-off projects. And it's not a marketplace model. It's not like an Uber type thing. Like at the end of the day, these projects are actually relatively infrequent for our customers. There's only, a handful of them a year. And so our preference has been to form a smaller number of tighter and higher quality relationships. And even these are sometimes MSPs who say, hey, we don't do project work, but they'll do project work with us because they know if we're sending it to them, it's a bigger ticket item. They know that they're immediately going to have access to IT glue and they're going to know what's going on with the customer before they walk in there. And so I think that's been kind of an interesting kind of evolution for us is, and again, it goes back to just focus and standardization. It's like, we got to do what we do really well. And then we just got to be really focused on what we don't do, but still making that a really good experience.
See, I wish there was more companies like yours because I feel that is a lot of time companies kind of lose their way as they grow bigger and bigger because they want to be the everything to everyone. And the problem is whatever core services and things that you started off with are usually what you're most competent at, and that you can make that better and better and better. And so you're constantly shaping it, making it, and, staying up with the industry versus, hey, we're going to spread ourselves so thin with all the different things that we do. And we only really do one well, and the rest of them are kind of like, eh. So I definitely appreciate hearing companies out there that do that and kind of stay in your lane and do what you're really good at and provide that great support that maybe somebody's not going to get from somebody else that's so thin out there that they can't.
But it's hard. It's hard. It's hard when you're trying to build a business. When we were signing up our first 10 customers, one of the hardest decisions we had to make in the first year of the business was somebody came inbound on the website. They emailed one of our employees and they said, hey, we're a 2,000 person company. We have a $300,000 annual budget, and without going into too much detail, it's basically to augment some stuff that was happening inside their IT department. And it wasn't not in our wheelhouse, but it definitely wasn't what we set this company up to do. And I think as a business, in total, we were doing I think we were going to do $300,000 in recurring revenue that year. We were on pace to do it in the next 12 months. So enough to pay some people. So then this group comes in and we would have doubled our revenue overnight, and it was a big splashy logo. And, we had a bunch of conversations internally about it. We're like, hey, we kind of already got a good thing going. And this is going to hurt in the short term. But if we sign up with these guys, we will just forever be married to whatever whims they have. And it's not our business. That's just not what we do. we're not building like bespoke integrations for enterprise IT departments. That's not why we're here.
That's good. Well, you're right. It is hard. It's hard to turn money down, but I think if people think about the long-term value of what they do, and they think about the decisions they make today will affect them years down the road, and understand where they're at, and keep that focus, I think it's key in any business that you do nowadays. Actually, it's probably always been key, but with technology, it's hard because, as Paco talked about earlier, the shiny new object syndrome, and we're going to do this way, and there's this new product out there that we're going to use, and it's going to save us time, but we're not counting all the time that it takes us to tear down what we have and reset it up, and it's constant. So, yeah, to do that it is hard, but I think it is the right decision at the end of the day. All right, let's go ahead and I'm going to have you guys gather any lasting thoughts, and we'll make some comments here in a minute. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back with any lasting things that we have not covered as of yet. This has been a great conversation with Ryan, and definitely appreciate all the insights and things on how your company runs and what you've been doing. But if you would like to support what we're doing here, I would encourage you to go over to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged. And what that gets you is it's about $1 a show. I only charge it, when we do a show. And so $4 or $5 a month, depending on how many shows we do. That's about what we do, right, Paco? 4 or 5, something like that. And and I think you can set a cap on it, to be honest with you. And so what it does get you, though, is it gets you into our super secret Facebook group, which hopefully down the road, we're going to change that into something that we run ourselves versus using Facebook. But anyways, right now it's in Facebook because everybody has a Facebook account pretty much, and everybody's used to it. So what we do is we have a group of, I think there's 158 business owners in there right now that will answer questions, will help you without making you feel stupid. And that's one of our criteria. We have a zero bullying policy of zero. Don't be a one of those. And if you are, it's zero tolerance. We boot you out. It's not that big a deal to us. We want a nice, safe environment where it doesn't matter if you're starting off day one, you can come into this group and you can ask a question, and people are there to help you, not to make you feel like you don't know what you're doing. Because there's too much of that in this world, and we do not allow that at all. So anyways, go over to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged and sign up today, and just follow the instructions, and we will get you into that Facebook group straight away. And I want to thank those that continuously support us month after month after month. We definitely appreciate it. It helps pay the low amount of bills we have around here, but it still helps pay those bills and keep the show afloat. So we definitely appreciate that. All right, so Paco, obviously we've had a great conversation with Ryan, and we talked about a lot of different things. You got any ending thoughts that you want to end on for this particular episode?
Not really. I think the majority of it, we had a great conversation on, how a managed service provider, IT business is kind of trying to get to their day and age at this point. I think we hit a lot of great key points that for those that joined late to rewind and get back to, things like standardization and understanding, your worth as a IT business, and understanding that sometimes making the smart move on money versus kind of just going with any money will help you get that much better moving forward, which is hard, right? And I think that, for the ones starting off in the early days, you kind of need to survive and you kind of take on the jobs that you can. But if you have the ability to be more conscious of who you decide to do work with, it just makes things a little bit easier. But and again, I'm not saying that we did the same thing like a lot of other MSPs did, where we would take on early work that we may not want to do, or et cetera, to just survive. And then once we got to a position where we were doing trucking and rolling, we understand what we were doing, we understand what our focus was. We then ended up making sure that those customers that we took on initially found better homes, essentially. And then, we just kept on moving forward with our focus. So that's what I would probably leave on for today.
Very cool. And Ryan, any lasting thoughts on anything we didn't cover that you'd like to cover in this episode of some of the stuff we talked about, or maybe didn't even talk about yet?
Well, yeah, in terms of summing up some of the more important thoughts, I think Paco basically took the words right out of my mouth. So
He's good at that.
Rewind 3 minutes and listen to what he said again, because I think it's so important. And then somewhat self-serving. One thing we didn't touch on, back in November, we acquired a local MSP here in New York called CNU. They've been a terrific fit for us. Without going into too much detail now, we are on the hunt to do more deals like that. So I think if you're an MSP and you're doing $1 million in ARR or more, and you like what you heard in terms of our approach to the market, the company culture, all those kinds of things, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to just take a call, even if it doesn't lead anywhere. But it's an important part of our strategy, and always happy to talk to other MSP owners. So,
well, that's great. And definitely check that out. And Ryan, if people want to get a hold of you or just contact you, where's the best place to go for that?
Email me directly, ryan@electric.ai.
All right, cool. And your website is electric.ai.
Sure is.
Okay. So what is .ai? Does that stand for artificial intelligence, or is that?
It could. Yeah, it was funny because initially, we were talking before we went live about, or I think we were already live about domains. I still wanted a domain that was short and easy to remember. And obviously we're injecting a ton of automation into what we do. And so we said, hey, electric.ai, it's easy to remember. I think my only regret is that almost every day since the day I started this company, and probably every day until the end of time, somebody asked me, so tell me more about the AI.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that it was actually a domain out there that was .ai. Yeah, I guess they have so many.
It was similar to, years ago when there was the .tv domain, and they bought it from the island nation of, I think, of Tuvalu or something, right? So AI is actually for Anguilla, but a lot of companies in the artificial intelligence space just started registering domains there. So.
That's awesome. That's cool. Good story, man. Well, I appreciate you coming out today, and appreciate all the insights and stuff that you gave us, as Paco said. And it's been enlightening for me to hear a company that's doing things a little bit different than maybe what's been done in the past, and kind of, focusing on the important things. And it's always nice to hear those types of companies and that type of story.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. This was a ton of fun. We'll have to do this again at some point in the future. Check back in with each other. So and good luck with your conference.
Appreciate it.
At this point, I've done so little outside of my house and my office. The thought of talking about IT at a Dave & Buster's sounds super appealing. So.
It was a blast last time. We're hoping to recreate that in a little bit different space. And yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that are itching to get out. And so we'll see where we're hoping, being in September, we're hoping that towards the end of the year, everything's going to be somewhat back to normal. I don't think everything will be exactly back to normal, but enough to where people feel comfortable getting out and doing what they need to do.
You said tickets are on sale now?
Yes. Yep.
I might just go ahead and buy one, and we'll see what happens.
All right. Awesome, man. Appreciate it. So Paco, if anybody wanted to find out where you were at, where could they go?
Well, they can tune into this fine programming every Friday at noon Eastern time, 11 Central. Or they can go ahead and find us at TechCon Unplugged in September 17th to the 19th over in Rosemont, Illinois.
Awesome, man. All right. You can watch live or hang out in the chat room over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. And subscribe and hit that notification button if you haven't, so you never miss an episode. It'll automatically let you know. They tell me to say that. I don't know why, but just do it anyways. You can also use your favorite podcasting app to take us with you wherever you go. You can listen in a car on the way to a client. You can listen washing the dishes, mowing the lawn here, hopefully in a few months. Those types of things where you can kind of just chill out, listen to our wonderful soothing voices, supposedly, and get some information while you're doing something else. Makes the time fly by. That is the number one reason why I listen to podcasts on the go all the time. I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.